Welcome to Beautifully Restored. I'm Melissa Stewart, and this is a personal growth podcast on using your setbacks for success. I was once a Baptist pastor's wife whose huge fall from grace left me feeling alone, completely ruined, and without hope. Join me as I interview people with some amazing stories of restoration. Plus, I will share my own journey of fighting back to a place in life where I now run several successful businesses, am raising two incredible kids, found love again, and no longer identify with my past mistakes. Because it's not about where you've been, it's about where you are going. Darrick Jones, welcome to Beautifully Restored. I'm super glad to have you on here. Excited for everyone that's listening to learn more about you and to hear your story. So thank you for this.
You're very welcome.
We met through a church group. This is wild. So you live in Kentucky, Somerset? Where is it in Kentucky?
It's Ferguson, Kentucky, but it's basically Somerset.
Somerset, yeah. So you're living in Kentucky, but I'm in Illinois, and we've never met in person, but we've met through our church group that was meeting on Wednesday nights, a special group called Starting Point, and we became Zoom friends. I heard your story, and I knew that this was a great story to have on Beautifully Restored. Just like me, you are a life that has been beautifully restored from what was once disastrous and going down a dark and dangerous path to now who you are today. So I'm excited for you to share that. And tell us first, before we get into all of that, what you do. What you used to live here in Decatur, but then you moved out to Kentucky. So what are you doing out there?
Well, when I lived in Decatur, I owned my own landscape company for 16 years. It was called Distinctive Earthly Designs. I moved here to met my wife. Actually, my cousin introduced me to my wife, which they were best friends.
Oh, cool.
And that's kind of what brought me to Kentucky. Since I've been here, I've worked for different landscape companies, and 5 years ago, I kind of woke up with paralysis from the waist down. Had emergency back surgery and was told I'd never walk again. With that being said, I am currently disabled. I do a little part-time job for the city I live in as a code enforcement officer. And then I kind of build furniture on the side a little bit.
I thought I saw that you were building furniture on Instagram. We started we became Instagram friends, and I saw that. So I was like, I wonder what he even does. I don't know what he does. Wow. But what a wild story. I didn't even know about the paralysis. That's a whole entirely another story that you could probably tell in another podcast about going through that. Yeah. I didn't know about that. That's unbelievable. So, wow, you are a fighter and a survivor, no doubt. Fighting through life and becoming better for it. So that's awesome. Okay, so you used to go to my church that we go to now. Now you're there in Kentucky. But your roots and your childhood, you started here in Decatur, right? So this is where you grew up. You went to, was it Warrensburg or?
Yes, I went to Warrensburg, Latham. Okay. Was born and raised there in Decatur. I left a few times. I lived up in Chicago for a while with my brother. That was in the early 90s. And then the late 90s, early 2000s, I lived in Rockford with my first wife.
Okay. All right. Yep. I've been to Rockford. Okay. So let's talk about your childhood, and let's take everyone down this journey of what you went through, how you got to that dark place. You grew up in a home. Now, was it a Christian home? Were you guys churchgoers? What was childhood like for you?
Yeah, childhood was brought up in a Christian family, a Christian home. We were at church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. Grew up, the church we went to was Foursquare. And So that was kind of the life that I mean, it was mandatory, even
Hmm.
when I got to high school, it was mandatory that, I go to church. Um, During all this, you're always taught, God is so loving, so um, powerful, so ultimate healing, all these things. And at 9 years old, my little brother died, and he was 7, of a really rare kidney disease called Barter syndrome. And that's kind of when I just couldn't understand it. So that's when I kind of turned my back on God and got angry with God, and just kind of didn't want anything to do with it.
Did that happen? Did your turning back on God actually happen when you were that young, or was that later as you got older, even at the age of 9?
It was basically then when I was 9 years old. I just knew, like I said, I couldn't understand, why such a loving God, all powerful God, all healing God, would take, my younger brother. I just couldn't understand that. So I mean, I really fought with all those emotions from, 9 until I was 13. And when I turned 13 is when I, started drinking. And the drinking, led to, marijuana, and then just it progressed. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was a full-fledged alcoholic.
Wow, that's wild. At that age, that's wild. You don't hear about that. Kids kind of dabble in things, but you don't hear about it really being that extreme. How? Tell me about your parents during this. Did your parents turn their back on God? I mean, they lost their child, probably one of the most devastating things that a person could go through. What was their response, and how did they handle that in regards with you?
They well, we all as a family, sought counseling, there at Foursquare Church. And being so young, I really don't know, really what my parents, like really went through. I knew that they were struggling, with things, and with the loss. But
Mhm.
you know, it I just didn't really, being, like I said, being so young, I just didn't understand really what they were going through either. Because I was trying to, you know, get it all, process it all through,
Mhm.
in my own head.
Yeah. Did you have other siblings, or was it just you and your brother?
I have an older brother as well.
Okay. Um,
Um,
Go ahead. Yeah, what were you gonna say about that?
I was gonna say, and he dealt with things, a lot differently than I did. I know he was extremely angry as well. Um, but and like I said, he dealt with things differently. My parents actually had no idea, what I was going through. It wasn't until I joined the Navy, and and I'd call home when I could. Um, is when they really realized that I had a problem. So I kept it.
So
I
you
literally kept it hidden from everybody.
that's hard to do. Growing up in the same home, and living with your parents and being
Right.
a full-fledged alcoholic in high school, and they didn't realize it. So during this time you were still going to church and playing that role of a
Yes.
good kid going to church doing his thing, but there was this side of you that was just wild and out of control.
Yes.
Wow.
Very much so.
Were you
I was extremely rebellious, growing up as a kid. Um,
towards your
you know,
parents?
yes, towards my parents. And then that even, as I got, older and into adulthood, it was the same way.
Mhm.
Um, I was trying and trying and trying to push them away, so they just wouldn't care. But then obviously, the parent, they never stopped caring.
Mhm. Well, that's good. You had good parents that loved you through that. I'm sure it was heart-wrenching and difficult for them to, to raise a kid who was that defiant and rebellious. So the fact that they stuck with you and loved you through that is awesome. So then you joined the Navy. So a guy who was struggling with rebellion and rules joined the Navy. How was that for you?
It was actually, it was really good. I didn't have, boot camp to me was a breeze. Breezed right through boot camp. My schooling, got to the ship, which was in 1990 is when I was sent out to my ship. And, then 90, because that was August of 1990. And then January 91 is when Desert Storm happened, which I was shipped over there.
Wow.
So, that's kind of, I think, the start of everything. Drinking just got, extremely worse when I was in the Navy, especially being overseas. It's legal, I think the legal age was 16 overseas. So like I said, my drinking just got, extremely worse. I eventually got the Dear John letter from the girl I was dating. This was in 92. And I attempted suicide and was eventually discharged, with a general under honorable condition discharge from the Navy.
Wow. Wow, that's heavy. I was going to ask you, were you struggling with depression? Would you call it that you were, even before the breakup with the drug use or the alcoholism, I guess we'll say, were you struggling with depression? Did you feel, was that the basis of it, was depression?
I don't think so, because after I got sober and, sought, quite a bit of counseling, it really just stemmed from, my brother's death, so instead of coping with the emotions that I was feeling, and voicing those and, talking those out to someone, I chose, and I just went and I started drinking, not knowing that, I had such an addictive personality. And once I started, there was no stopping.
Is there a history of this sort of thing in your family that you know of?
Yes, there is. Yeah.
Do you believe in the genetic component of that?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
I believe that it is genetic, and that's why, alcoholism is considered a disease. And I know there's a lot of people that struggle, with that, but it is proven, that it is, a disease and can be handed down genetically,
Yeah.
I unfortunately, got it. My older brother did not.
Yeah. I think that's good for people that are listening to this to hear. There's going to be a lot of Christians that are probably listening to this, that they're generally, it's conservative type people or maybe some hardcore Christians, I feel like, are the ones that say alcoholism is not a disease, it's a sin. And that's a sin problem, and that's, you got to confess and give it over to God, which is partly true. But I think it's great to hear from you a perspective from someone who has been an alcoholic, who struggled with it since the age of 13. I think it's good for them to hear the perspective that I've been there, I've lived it, I know, yes, it is. It is a genetically passed disease that is triggered by excessive alcohol abuse, right? Had you never, excessively used alcohol, it wouldn't have probably manifested within you, I'm guessing, but because you did, it's like there it was, right? Is that how you would explain it?
Yeah, I think so, because it was, I liked it so much. In the beginning, it's, you like that feeling, but then whenever, it got so far, I couldn't turn it away. It was constantly on my mind. I have to have a drink, good, bad, happy, sad, it didn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I had to have that drink.
Well,
And
at that point, it's a physical dependence, correct? I mean, it's
yes, it
mental,
was.
it's physical, it's like a chemical reaction now where your body, you can actually die from not drinking, from not
Yes.
not having it if you're an alcohol at that level. So
Right.
I think people need to hear that. I think sometimes people don't realize how serious that is.
Yeah, and it is, luckily, when I quit, the first time and the second, because I did quit once in 1993. My brother and my family had a intervention with me when I lived in Chicago, and I stopped drinking, for 10 years, but I couldn't put the drugs away. I was constantly, still smoking marijuana, taking LSD, mushrooms, so those 10 years of sobriety off of the alcohol, was replaced with, just more drugs.
So there really is something to the fact that you can't give up one thing and replace it with another new addiction and have total healing and restoration from it, because you've just replaced one thing with another. Right. And so unbelievable to think that you didn't drink for 10 years and then you apparently went back to it. That's a long time to go and then to go back to it. But like you said, it's like you hung on to that. You kept feeding that side of you, that I always call it like the green monster inside of us, whether it's a sugar addiction or whether it's whatever, you keep feeding that green monster. It doesn't die, it lives, and it eventually overtakes you again. So let's talk about your journey to sobriety, because I know you have a really cool story in there. I definitely wanted you to tell about that, about being in the park that day and you calling out to God. But you were addicted to alcohol. You were then dabbling in drugs also. Your family, I know what I wanted to say. Your family had an intervention. So let's talk about interventions just for 1 second. What do you think about interventions? I used to watch the show Intervention all the time. I loved that show where these people would blindside this person and they were in this room and all these circles of people. And then you had the interventionist, like the trained therapist or the whatever, and that's what they do. And they lead it. And then these families read letters and they tell you how much they love you. And so basically you take a person who is not necessarily ready to change, who is maybe not even at the end of themselves. They should be. Many times I watch that show and I'm like, God, how much further do they have to go? How much more of a rock bottom is there for that person? But you take someone who hasn't come to get help. You take them, you blindside them, you tell them how much you love them, how much you want them to get help. And you many times they give them ultimatums. We're going to cut you off. We're not going to, give you money. We're not going to give you housing. We're not going to blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to buy alcohol for you anymore, whatever. And that person is like at this crossroads where they're like, I either go to rehab and I get help, or my family's going to pretty much cut some ties with me. They're still going to love me, but they're going to cut ties. My question for you, Darrick, is, does that work? I feel like they've gotten away from interventions over the last 10 years or less. I don't know. But what's your opinion on interventions?
Personally, I don't think that they do work. And that this is just from, personal experience. Because during that intervention, I told them everything that they wanted to hear. As a recovering alcoholic and drug addict, we are very manipulative. We're, straight up liars, that we will tell anybody and everybody what they want to hear. And that's basically what I did at that time. Then once I, and I did stop for a while, because I went, to some, therapy and rehab stuff. And, but I felt better, smoking the marijuana, and that kind of stuff than I did drinking. So that's why I stayed away from it for so long.
Okay.
Because, I wasn't getting sick.
Yeah.
After drinking so much.
So you were getting like that buzz feeling or that numb feeling where is that what you're getting from it? You know, are you getting from like that numbing of like real life and emotions, that high, I don't know, that high, that happiness. I don't, what were you getting from all of that?
It was the high, it was the escaping reality. Because reality, you know, when I look at it, and, you know, like I've mentioned before, you know, reality was my little brother died at the age of 7.
Mm.
And life was hard.
Mm.
And so that's why I did it, because I was escaping reality every day, because I didn't want to face reality, you know, and I thought I was living a happy life, you know, by doing the things I did. But like I said, that's the main reason, you know, was so I could escape reality, because I didn't want to live in the reality.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, looking back, could have been done differently? You know, like if someone's listening to this today and they have children, and maybe they have experienced huge loss in losing a young child, or someone close to them, maybe a parent. You know, there's just tragedy all the time. I mean, in our community, we hear about kids dying of cancer and kids dying in car accidents. And so there are families that are going through this right now. What, if anything, could have been done differently for you, Darrick, as a 9-year-old boy?
I think just you know, talking more, you know, to people. You know, like I said, we went to, you know, family counseling, you know, but I think I needed more than that. I needed more one-on-one, you know, stuff. You know, with a child therapist, you know, not one of the pastors at the church. And I think that probably would have helped me out more, personally, you know, to get all that, you know, that stuff off my chest, you know, all that emotions, all that hurt and anger and all them things that I was feeling at that time. If I was able to get that off my chest, instead of, you know, tucking it away, you know, acting like everything's just fine.
Yeah, I think that's really key. I think the fact that you said, if you could have had that one-on-one, because I envision you, you know, in a pastor's office or something at the church with your family, and you guys were there as a group family therapy, you know, therapy session with the pastor, counseling, I guess we'll call it, and a little 9-year-old boy sitting there watching his parents grieving, talking it out. I mean, how much are you really going to come out and say, like, I'm pissed, you know, like I'm like really angry that this happened, and I think God sucks. You know, like what kid's going to feel comfortable saying that in a group family counseling session in front of their pastor or someone? I think maybe having you know, paired up with the right person that is like you said, a child therapist, one-on-one, saying, listen, buddy, you can say whatever you want to say in here. You can cuss, you can scream, you can curse, you can do whatever you want to do. Just get it out and let's talk about this. You know, maybe that's actually really interesting to me to hear you say that. I wasn't sure what you were going to say, because you look back sometimes and you're like, what could have been done differently? You know, could there have been anything done differently? You know, of course, your parents were doing the best that they knew how to do. There's no handbook for this. Nobody knows what to do when you go through this.
Right. And there is, you know, and, you know, some of it too, you know, even stemmed, you know, like I said, at 13, you know, I had some of the wrong friends, you know, and their parents, you know, had alcohol, and, you know, and one thing led to another, you know, so if I would have chose, you know, hung out with different friends, like I said, the one-on-one counseling that I probably should have, you know, definitely should have needed, you know, and I think things would have turned out a lot differently,
Yeah.
you know.
I think that's good to know, for any of us. And unfortunately, there may be someone listening to this now that isn't going through that, but will go through something that's really difficult. And so it's good to think about those things and to know that they're important, for each person to grieve and mourn in their own way. But again, I of course we don't fault your parents. I can't even imagine. I mean, honestly, I just can't even imagine what that was like. So here we go. You are now struggling with, substance abuse. You got into, a cocktail of drugs, different kinds of drugs. And would you say at some point you did hit a rock bottom? Did you ever come to the end of yourself? What would you say?
Yeah. And that's kind of, I'll get to kind of lead into it. Because when I started drinking again after the 10 years of going without it, it was after, I, caught my, ex-wife, they were cheating, she was cheating on me. Once there, we kind of separated, I knew exactly what to do. And I picked up the drink again, and it didn't take but, 2-3 weeks. And I was, had progressed, triple of what I was before I quit.
Sheesh.
And then that was the first time I was 32, 31, 32. And that was the first time that I touched cocaine.
Wow.
So, and I can even go back. I mean, even those early 90 years, when I stopped drinking, I was selling drugs, I got involved with, the wrong crowd back then as well. I was selling for the Cicero Mafia, back in them days. And it was, it was extremely scary.
I imagine you had some dangerous episodes.
There's several of them, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all that, fast forward, to, after my wife left, like I said, I started drinking again heavily. I was anywhere between a case and a half of, beer a day, plus, some shots. I started the cocaine. I moved back to Illinois. I basically had a nervous breakdown up in Rockford. My dad and my brother came and got me, brought me back to Decatur. And this was 2005. And like I said, I still obviously wasn't done doing what I was doing, living the life I was living. I was drinking and doing so much drugs that I was hoping that I wouldn't wake up in the next day. So I said, things just got so, I mean, it was really bad. Ended up, meeting, one of the cocaine dealers in Decatur. Got to be pretty good friends with him, so I started selling for him. That's when me and him got in this argument. I had him in a chokehold and, was ready to kill him. Someone, one of the guys that was there pulled me off of him, and I literally walked from basically Williams Street and 22nd Street, the Staley Viaduct area, all the way to Sunnyside Park. And then
which is like a good 5-6 miles, maybe. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
And the entire, and I was drunk and I was, high on coke. And the whole way I was, stopping by friends' houses the whole way, re-upping, drinking a couple beers with them, doing more coke. I got to Sunnyside Park about 5:30 in the morning. And I knew that because I was living with my parents, and they didn't, know that I had left the house, because my truck was still there. And I knew that I couldn't go home because they were, that was about the time they were getting up, getting ready to go to work. So like I said, I'm sitting there at Sunnyside Park, and literally out of nowhere, God happened.
Hmm.
And I found myself on my knees screaming, God, if you're there, if you like people say you are, then help me. Because I was agnostic. I didn't believe, I knew that there was a higher power, but I didn't believe in God. And it was later that afternoon, my mom worked there at First Christian Church. And I called her and I was like, I need to come and talk to, Pastor Tom Sager. And that was the starting point.
What do you think drove you to call out and to ask God for help?
One of them, the only answer that I could come up with is it was all the years that my parents had prayed for me. And it was an answer to their prayer.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's a good reminder for everyone out there who's praying for something, and maybe they've been praying for years and that something still hasn't come, that never give up, right?
That's right. And we kind of remind ourselves, God's timing is not the same as ours.
Yeah. That's right.
But yeah, it was that was, like I said, it was a powerful moment. Like I said, I mean, I don't know where it came from except God. I mean, that's the only answer that I have to this day, is that it was God that dropped me to my knees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something. I mean, that is just absolutely 100% supernatural right there. A guy who was high on coke and drunk and walked all those miles and nowhere to go to come to that place is really something amazing. And what a great thing that you had a mom to call who answered the phone and who, was right there and ready to get you help. And I think that's a game changer. Had you not had your parents, what would you have even done? Who would you have called? That's good.
Right.
So yeah. Was that the last day that Darrick Jones was ever high and drunk?
Actually, it was not, because there in the beginning, those first few months, that was August of 2007, was the night that all happened at Sunnyside Park, or that morning. Mm-hmm. So between August and November, I was still, fighting, that tug of war between the flesh and the spirit.
Were you going to church then with, going to First Christian? Yes. Or whatnot? Okay.
Yeah. I had, started going to church regularly. I was meeting with Tom Sager several times, two, sometimes 3 days a week. I would meet with him. We were working through the 12 steps through a book called Serenity, 12-step companion to the New Testament. Is how I worked my 12 steps. And that basically that book, what it does, it relates every single step to scripture.
That's cool.
Because in the past, I'd done the AA, I'd done rehabs, I'd done AA, I'd done all that stuff, and none of it really set into me. And I knew that, if I was going to do it, I had to do it a completely different way. And that was putting God first and foremost. And this was kind of right before, I think Celebrate Recovery was just starting, but it hadn't gotten to Decatur, Illinois yet. But in a sense, what I did, I did the Celebrate Recovery, just in a different format.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's really cool.
And there's several throughout this entire process. Like I said, I mean, there was several, God moments, especially after, after November, because I had violated my probation from a 2006 arrest of possession of cocaine. I was put on a probation. I violated that probation. And so I was in the midst of, all that court stuff going on when all this stuff happened. And like I said, and I had slipped, between August and November, I'd slipped, a few times, 3-4 times, I found myself, back in the bar, drinking and whatnot. And, and it was November 9th, was the very 2007 was the last night that I've ever had a single drop drink or any drug in my system. That was when I got my third DUI, which, like I said, I was, in this battle with courts and all that because of the probation violation. And I was looking at doing 5 years in prison at that time. And the DUI being my third DUI, added another 2 years to that. So I was looking at doing 7 years in prison.
Eesh.
My attorney kept, pushing, continuing my case, and then this time from November until March of 2008, when I had my sentencing hearing, I went on my own, went through, the 75-hour rehab that I had to, do. But the thing that was different this time was it was for me. It wasn't for my parents. It wasn't for my friends. It wasn't for anybody but myself. So I had all that stuff done when I went to my sentencing hearing in March of 2008. And the judge, I remember her asking me, she said, Mr. Jones, she said, why should I give you another chance? And I said, ma'am, I've done a 180-degree turn in my life, and I live in my life for Christ now. And I said, and that's all that I got to say. It's where it seemed like a year went by as she was looking through my file. And then she said, Mr. Jones, she said, is that your support group family and support group behind you? And I looked back, and there were several members of my small group that were there, and my mom, and they were all had their hands locked together, raised in the air, praying. I said, yes, ma'am, it is.
Wow.
And it seemed like another year went by. And she said, Mr. Jones, she said, I'm giving you one last chance. She's like, but and I had ended up doing 3 consecutive weekends in county jail, suspended my license for 5 years. And the 2-year probation. That was God.
Yeah, it was. Wow.
Because looking at my file, there's no explanation why I should have been let off.
Mm-hmm.
And she even said, she's like, and I'll be watching every step that you make for the next 2 years. If I see your name on any docket in this courtroom, you're gone.
Wow. That is a powerful picture when you described your family behind you, hands held high. Oh, that's amazing. I imagine that day you felt like you had a second chance to just finally start over and become a new person, have a new life. And I imagine when you left there, you probably felt like there's no way in heck I am going to ruin this chance. I mean, tell me how determined you were from that point on to be a different person.
I mean, it was like, difference between night and day. I Anytime the church doors were open, I was in it.
Mm.
I got involved in the small groups. I think it was shortly after even my, sentencing hearing that Brian Talty asked me to, if I wanted to be a youth leader. And I, accepted. And to me, that was one of the best things that ever happened to me. For one, being able to be with these teens, knowing that that's the age that I started.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I could give them any hope or inspiration or advice, not to go down the same road that I did, I thought that was one of the greatest opportunities. I dove into reading books, on spirituality, reading the Bible. I mean, just anything that I could do to keep my mind off of drinking. That's what I did. I continued to, meet with, the pastor, there at the church, for a total of almost 2 years that I was seeing one, every day. So I was extremely determined that there was no way that I was going back to that other life, that I was going to do whatever it took to not go back.
How hard was it for you to trust yourself, or are you not able to trust yourself in that situation? Because were there thoughts like, gosh, I know I'm just gonna screw up again. I'm gonna screw up again like I always have, and I'm gonna be back to where I was. Did you fight that?
I did. I mean, I fought that for a long time. I mean, I even went through the process, of asking, why me, God? Why are you giving me another chance? Why? There was a kid there in the youth group that, was diagnosed with leukemia, fighting for his life. And I was like, here this innocent boy is, hasn't done anything. Why me? So I said I did. I fought with that for a long time. It was a good year anyway, that I really struggled, with the why. Why was I spared? Why was I given this second chance? And the trusting, yeah. I mean, the first year I couldn't even go to a restaurant that served alcohol. Because if I seen it, I wanted it.
So it was hard. It's not like God just takes this away from you and you never wanted, like it wasn't even tempting ever again, and you turned your back and you were done. It was a fight.
Yes,
Wow.
It was. And it was probably about a year and a half, and that's when, because Pastor Tom had left at that time, and I was seeing Pastor Darren Embry is who I was seeing at that time, and it was about a year and a half, and him, my parents, and myself, we all, I guess felt it, the feeling, from God, that God truly did deliver me from that disease. And since God delivered me from that, I've never thought about it. I don't crave it. I don't think about it. I mean, there's none of that stuff.
Can you be around it and
Absolutely, I can. I can go anywhere. I can be around people that are drinking, and I'm not tempted at all. But then don't people that are listening, whatever you do not get complacent and say you've got it licked, because you never do, and you never will. And those are words that will never come out of my mouth, is saying that I've got this beat, because I don't.
Do you still say, I know a lot of people that were alcoholics, they still say in present tense, I am an alcoholic, even though they don't drink anymore. Do you say that, or do you not say that?
I do. I am an alcoholic. Once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. Doesn't mean you have to be, it's kind of like diabetes. Once you're diabetic, you're always diabetic. You go into remission. And I think that's kind of the same way with alcoholism is in being an alcoholic. I'll always be one, but I don't have to practice it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
through the grace of God, I don't have to go that. I don't have to practice it. I don't have to, drink.
Yeah, that's really powerful. You're an alcoholic who doesn't drink alcohol, but you know that it's in there, and if you were to start, you'd be down a difficult path again. And so, it is amazing though that the healing did come, and that you are able to live in peace now and not be tormented by it any longer.
Right, and part of that process of all that healing, I guess, within me was I had to become. I had to learn to love myself for who I am. I'm an alcoholic, drug addict, and a felon. These are, and I guess you can always put it this way, these are labels, society, in a sense, has put me on, but that is not who I am today. Physically, yes, they're labels, but it's not who I am today. It's
Right.
That's not how I live today.
Right.
But I had to learn to love myself for being that person.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was able to love myself until I could truly love God 100% fully, and love anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. How hard was it to forgive yourself?
It was extremely hard. Extremely hard. It took a long, long while. I'm going to say probably close to 2 years before I was able to forgive myself for what I did. And there's still times, and I know God has forgiven me. I know my parents have forgiven me. But there are days and there are times that I have a hard time forgiving myself for what I did to my parents, because I put them through living hell for the majority of my life. And that's still a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they didn't deserve that.
Right. I can relate to that, Darrick, in my own way with my messy life. And I hurt my kids through that when they were younger. And, and it's not my time to tell my story right now, but I understand what you mean when you say that. That's a tough one. And I guess that is just the ugly side of sin and living a life, to yourself, like you did and like I did at one time too. I mean, you can't go through a life like that unscathed and not hurting people in the midst of it. And I think that pain is still in our hearts deep down when we get into those weak moments when we feel it. And that pain is still there, but it's there for a purpose, just to remind us. It's not there every day. It's not there all day long to taunt us and to shame us and to guilt us, but it is still there just in that little bitty way, just to remind us that is not a life we want to live, because it has hurt people. And I try not to think about that part very often, because that is hard. So when you say that, I feel that pain. I understand what that feels like. But on a lighter note, I would say, Darrick Jones, you are better for it. And you are a better man now than you have ever been. And you're a stronger person now than you have ever been. And you can help people in a way that you could never have been able to help them before. How does that resonate with you to hear that? Do you feel that? Do you believe that?
It feels really good to hear it. It's humbling. And that was one of the questions I remember asking myself, and, the pastor I was seeing was, what's my purpose? What is my purpose? And it finally came to me, my purpose is sharing this story to whoever I possibly can. That's the purpose that God has set for me. He has used all my past, all my failures, all the stuff that I've done. Number one, God loves us no matter what our mess is, period. His love is it's unfathomable. But my purpose is to share this story, of God's great, grace, his mercy, his love, like I said, to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that is my hope, that someone could hear it, in return, change their life as well.
There's no doubt in my mind that your story is and will be used for that very purpose. There's no doubt. And it sucks to have gone through it and to have been the person who did all of that and caused a lot of that. But there's no doubt that it will be used to help people, and it already has. So what are you hoping for? We talked about this a little bit last night in our church group. You've got some ideas and some visions of maybe getting involved in some ministries of some sort and helping people maybe that are struggling the way you did. Tell the listeners about that.
Yeah. Back when I first got sober, I really wanted to, get into like urban ministry, basically, going on the streets, and meeting, these homeless people, the drug addicts, whatever, meet them out on the street, and basically share my story, of hope, because most of these people don't have hope. So I think that that's somewhere that I'd like to go, and move forward with. Like I said, it was one of the things that I felt God called me to it, back in 2007, 2008, in that time frame. And like I said, I was denied. I applied for two schools, to do it. I was, denied, and I guess I just got frustrated, and I never went back to it. I think now that I'm down here in Kentucky, because it is an area, that there's a lot of homeless and there's a lot of drug addicts, and in this area. So I think I'd kind of like to, get into that, and do a little bit of urban ministry, and meet these people out on the streets.
I love that. I would encourage you to hold on to the fact that every no gets you closer to the yes, and the yes that you're looking for, and the right avenue and the right path. Do not let someone turning you down or a door being shut keep you from fulfilling your ultimate purpose that God has for your life, to help people. Those were not the right avenues, but the right avenue is still out there. You have to just continue to find it. Yeah. There are so many stories of people like that published their books, authors that like turned it into like 14 publishers, and every single one told them no, they didn't want to publish their book because it sucked. And then they self-published it. They made it happen anyway, and it was a bestseller. I love stories like that. And Darrick, it's the same for you. Just because you got turned down twice doesn't mean that it's not the right thing. Right. If this is something you feel called to do, then I would encourage you to go for it with all your heart and find a way and make a way. You don't need school to do it anyway. You can do that at school, but that's just probably a waste of money. But whatever it takes, go after it, because you did not live this life to waste. And so I'm excited for you to have been able to tell your story here today. Before we shut it down, I want to make sure that you were able to say everything that you wanted to say, that you didn't leave anything out. And if you did, please feel free now to pop that in there, and whatever you want these listeners to walk away with and to hear. I want to make sure you get that message across today.
Sure. I'll just kind of say the last thing of, I have a little short version of my story. And it's this, and while not every day is easy, I'm able every day through God's grace. I've mentioned it before. God has delivered me from the disease of alcoholism and has given me the strength, guidance, mercy, and faith to be alcohol and drug free today. And God truly does bring beautiful things from beneath the dirt. So I ask you all to allow God to till up the soil within your hearts. It's all of this interview with Mel, and all of it, is, by God's grace and for his glory, and I have been clean and sober, now 13 and a half years.
That's legit. That is legit. I applaud you. That is so amazing. 13 and a half years is huge. Drug addiction is no joke. Alcoholism is no joke. It is so hard for people to turn from. And if they can see a story of success, victory, and by watching your life and what you have done with it and how God has helped you to come through this and be restored completely. And now the way that you are leading people, like when I hopped in on this Wednesday night call, I didn't know who you were, but I kind of thought, well, this guy's somebody, like he must be a leader of something. He must be working in a church or doing, because he knows what he's talking about. Like, you are now in a position to lead people and to inspire. And who would have freaking thought, right? I'm the same way. I can say that, Darrick, because I can say it about myself. Like, who would have thought that with the messy lives that we had, that people could look to us for encouragement and for inspiration and for help. I imagine people come to you for help. They come to me for help. It's wild. Like, really, speaking of our group, Andrea Grundon, Jonathan's wife, who is she's one of the pastor's wives. She said this one time, and I'll never forget this, and I want to share this with you because I think you'll like it. She said that when a man sins, not to himself, right? We know this. When you sin, it's not just to you. No man lives on an island. When you sin, it affects people, right? Like, your sin affected your parents and those around you. Unfortunately, our sin is not to just ourselves. It affects other people around us, and we hurt people through the process. I hurt my children, my now ex-husband, my parents. I hurt my entire church. I hurt lots of people through my sin. But Andrea pointed out that even though our sin does affect people and we do hurt people with it, our restoration, our healing, the good that comes from it, the people that we now are becoming, Darrick, we can actually impact way more people with that story. More people than who we hurt. I hurt, let's say 100 people, as I hurt a lot, because I hurt a church of people. I can now affect thousands and impact thousands of people with my story of hope and restoration. And Darrick, you can too. And I think that's an amazing thought, to think that this story is way more powerful than the other. So hold on to that hope and know that you are changing lives and you are doing so good. I feel better to have known you and to now become friends. Thank you for coming on here and being very vulnerable. You brought tears to my eyes, and I'm sure you did to many of the listeners. You're a very special person, and God has big plans for you. So thank you again for this opportunity.
You're welcome, and thank you for inviting me to tell my story.
Absolutely. Anytime. And you've got other side stories in your life. We can always have you back on to tell another one. So thanks, Darrick.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Beautifully Restored podcast, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes. Check out my website link that I've included in the show notes to sign up for some free stuff and stay up to date on my blog and special offers. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.